Welcome to another exciting episode of Oh Say Can You See, which is brought to you by CTV Society, also known as S.E.E., the Society for Economic Equality. And we've been doing this show for a long time. And tonight on this show, we continue to advocate for social justice as well as to examine today's headlines. Yes. And with me tonight is the Noble Blue, also known as Mark Hammond. And I am Mark Zawitowski, also known as Mark Dickerson, occasionally. And we are members of the CTV Society. Also, we are members of S.E.E., the Society for Economic Equality. And tonight, we examine the social issues of today, but without the profit motive involved. And actually, we're talking about social issues of today that are very rarely talked about. And those are the ones that shade over into the realm that some people call conspiracy theory, and some people call, BS or WTF or whatever they call it. It's still not, it's somehow not accepted by the mainstream national media, and perhaps that's on purpose, because all over the country, people are reporting the oddest things, especially all over the country and even over many parts of the world. People report booms from the sky that seem to resonate in the earth, so perhaps what's happening is coming from the earth itself. And all over the country, there are hundreds of reports of booms and earthquakes coming up from the ground. And yet the national media doesn't cover that. And among other things, we have so many other strange things.
Well, Mark, do you know what the largest explosion ever recorded on Earth was?
Recorded Krakatoa.
More than 1,000 nuclear bombs in violence. And many times stronger than Krakatoa.
What was that?
In fact, once the island exploded, it went so high up and came down so hard.
What? Bikini Atoll?
No, Santorini. It made a tidal wave a mile high.
That wasn't recorded per se.
No, they've got records of it, but it was many times bigger than Krakatoa. It covered the earth in dust for months, if not years. And that was supposedly one of the locations for Atlantis, was Santorini.
Well,
and the Minoans.
I really think that's a sort of, I don't think that's Atlantis.
Sir Arthur Evans, you know about him? Sir Arthur Evans? His father was very influential in history, archaeology. He went to Santorini and found these Minoan temples that preceded the Mycenaeans.
Santorini was a major center of the Minoan civilization, the Cretan Minoan civilization, for sure. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Just like in England, there was a group of people that we don't know much about that made the Stonehenge. It wasn't the Druids. The Druids found it.
Yeah, it wasn't the Celts. It wasn't the Druids, the priests of the Celts. No, they didn't find it. It's thought, we don't know. A lot of these, when people are moving around blocks that are so heavy it doesn't really make sense to move them around, I think we're talking about something that is now pretty well documented, that there was a megalithic civilization during the Ice Ages that was moving around these great blocks.
Right.
And everything else they did is vanished. But these great block projects that they had, remain with us. And, they could be 50, 40, 30,000 years old, these things. Some great civilization at least died with the end of when the last ice age was going through its end. These people tried to survive within our culture somehow, And the theory is that they become the great influencers behind the scenes. I've seen a video where a guy is like, he seems to be on his deathbed. He's made some other statements before, but he's like a double PhD or something, and he taught at some big Ivy League thing. So he like knew his stuff. But he says around 96, with the internet starting to go, he just had access to a lot of things that had been kept out of the media at all.
Right.
But they started filtering into the internet media.
Yeah.
And he's been in it a lot longer than I have. And he made a statement that sounded like, all the conclusions that I would make at this point, is that there was some great civilization, maybe several great civilizations that have been destroyed by, some kind of recurring cataclysm or climate change or something in the past. And
Yeah, what's a Vimana? But a airplane of some sort or a rocket ship. Flying platforms in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads.
oh yeah.
They're called Vimanas.
Well, there are places that have been underwater for maybe 15,000, maybe 11,000 years.
Yeah.
Been under a couple hundred feet of water, like 200
Yeah.
feet or more, 300
Well, I
feet,
read that it was
off of
330
India.
feet.
So,
The ocean
that,
has risen 330 feet in the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
few million years.
so there was a civilization before, and it is outside of the books that are kept in our, classrooms and universities and high schools, So we're mankind in amnesia, to, bring up a book title by an author
Is it just
who
me, or
shall
does it seem like
remain
we are
unmentioned at the time.
kind of sleepwalking through time? That everybody's got their own vision, they're all in their own little worlds, what they want, what they value. There's no unification on virtually anybody's bucket list of exactly what they want to
Well,
do.
what's really strange, okay, this guy, this was the main, I was thinking of having one big roll-in, but I would divide it into two, but ultimately I couldn't find the cord to make my camera power up. But anyway, this guy, he seems to be on his deathbed, and he's talked to this woman, like independent video reporter, quite a few times in the past. But he's saying, so, I'm like a double PhD in 96. I found the internet, and I just started really intensely pursuing certain projects and realized that, the whole academic field is a bullshit covering to, what's really there. And somehow by keeping all the disciplines divided
Right.
within humanity's so-called scholarly, liberal, platform of investigation, it's not that at all. It helps to suppress the real understanding. And money becomes involved on top of that to suppress people from having the understandings that are politically inappropriate to, either other political or other economic or both, interests involved.
Well, if you look at history, it does seem like most of the religious foundations of society were based on either a strict code of morals, like Apollo in the Greek myth. He was a sun god, so everything was direct and straightforward. And then there was the Dionysian side. And if you look at most religions today, they're based on, you have the Sufis and the Zen people on one side, then you've got these traditionalists that are all caught up in their scriptural knowledge and stuff.
Are those the Apollonians?
The Apollonians, what did we figure out today? Didn't we say there was some ancient history there with the Assyrians and the Sumatra? Before Ur and Uruk, there was that town, what was it? Edu.
Eridu, the original city at the base of the civilization that was in the middle of what we now call the Persian Gulf, which was a river valley. So if things were 200 or 300 feet lower in terms of sea level, then that was at the end of a very fertile river valley that had existed for 10 or 15,000 years. And then the Ice Age ended, and there was a certain amount of melt-off, and it got flooded over, perhaps 11,000. Well, 11,000, then again 10,000 years ago, there was a asteroid strike that brought back the Ice Age for an extra 1,000 years after it was fading out, they say. But anyway, it does appear that all over the world there are these immense buildings made of immense blocks.
What's that one
Sometimes
place,
there are blocks that
Lebanon?
are the size of submarines,
What's
but
that
they're
one
solid.
hugest rock that he ever carved out? It's in Lebanon. At
There would be no way.
what's the name of that
that
place? Barbados?
There would be no way practically, I think, that 20,000 slaves could be employed in such a out of the way place to make something like that happen. I don't think
I
that's
don't know.
possible. I don't. I think what happened was, and this is what people think, because Tibetan monks supposedly can do it to this day, they were moving these things through a phonic technology or something. Somehow a certain tone was going, and these things were moving.
Yeah.
That seems to be the message of a lot of the weird Egyptian stuff and ancient
Tesla.
Sumerian stuff, is that and to this day Tibetans with certain chanting deep multi-resonant tones are able to move massive rocks around, apparently.
Well, look at it this
I
way,
think
Mark.
that's what was going on.
Look at it this way. The possibilities of the mind discovering what's going on are limited to the ability for a person to comprehend all the variables involved. And I think what happens is when we open one door, like the door of technology, we close this other door of the mystic arts that were probably more prevalent back in the day. What was that one book we read a few years ago about the crystals and how they used the crystals to generate power in these ancient Atlantean and even previous to Atlantis civilizations? And that maybe that great valley on Mars, the Marius Valorous or whatever it is biggest valley in the
Valles
universe.
Marianas,
That could have been
Martian
some sort of
valleys,
energy beam that ripped a big gash in the side of Mars. Not only that, but check out the abnormalities on the far side of the moon. Just for shaking up your sense of reality. And if you were to go back even a few hundred years and tell them what we think we know now, they would think you're a stark raving lunatic. They had much more certainty than we have, for one thing. They don't call the 21st century the age of anxiety for nothing. Because we
they
opened
called
it.
the 20th century the age of
But in
anxiety.
those old days, these people were truly and absolutely sure that they were going to either heaven or hell, depending on their behaviors and who they worshipped and which God was the true God.
I think the 21st century is the age of unreality. So most people are faced with a reality, but they have multiple unrealities that they can rely upon.
Yeah.
And I think this is the magic of the politics of our age, is that humanity is marching off to a kind of seemingly inevitable extinction, and yet it does not react. Especially the United States does not react.
So I don't think we're really humans. We're more of a observational platform.
We're certainly not living up to what a human being can be. I'll say that much. I think a human being can, be a much more self-respecting creature than one that would let this sort of thing happen.
Well,
to their
somebody that
society.
thought about this for a long time, Stephen Hawking, he's very leery of the AI revolution. He thinks that they're going to replace us. Why wouldn't they? If we're slow and dim-witted, it seems like that's history, isn't it? That the faster and more intelligent creatures.
This guy that's dying, that I was talking about, that I unfortunately didn't have with me today, but I intended it. This guy says, the AI is simply there to replace us. That the AI is going to replace us. The people are moving underground. The people are actually psychopaths who are in control. They don't care about the mass of humanity, and they believe, like the so-called Georgia guide zones, that there should only be 500 million people, including the surface dwellers and those who dwell beneath the ground,
Yeah.
which is them, in the age in which they kill off most of us. And that's what's going on right now. And
Yeah.
I think it's probably true. I
Have you
really
seen
do.
that last?
There's been so much underground construction. You know,
Have you seen that last
the
Avenger
thing that
movie?
I've learned, and one thing that this guy talks about, the guy who's dying, that I would have shown tonight, is that all over the U.S. there have been booms, booms, booms coming from underground. Grand Rapids is honeycombed with all sorts of underground architecture already. So we haven't heard these booms, but in a lot of places, they need to connect up and build these connections between towns and cities, you know, as a part of an underground network of control.
Yeah, you saw Jesse
from
Ventura's.
people who dwell below,
Yeah.
who control
10
what
million
goes on
square
above
feet.
in some kind of
Underground, the Ozarks.
post-apocalypse, you know, parent scenario.
Underground.
They're preparing for it. Yeah.
They're already there. You know, they're living
Well,
underground
they're
now
prepared for it, yeah.
in their minds.
And I think that's totally true. And yet, our media doesn't deal with it. One thing I've learned is that you're free in the United States if you're at a low level of influence. And then there's an intermediate zone where it's really kind of dangerous to be in the media. And then there's a zone above that where it's safer. You know, I know some of these sites that have had millions of hits, they're pretty safe. You know, they might be made to go out of business, but, you know, right now they're pretty safe from, you know, being killed off or whatever.
Like
But
Carl Sagan.
in the middle zone, you know, I would say it's probably a very dangerous place to be. And there's a power in the U.S. that is really trying to suppress your reality, and that's an absolute truth. You know, beyond all of it, of course, it's an absolute
No, I think
truth.
what they're doing is more and better. They're going to more and better us to death and take away all the good stuff we already have and replace it with this plastic crap.
No, I think we're at the point where they don't even want to like give us anything that's more and better. They're just sort of
They
they've
sell
been
you on
whole-
more and better. They don't really give it to you. They just sell you that more and better is the reality. While they take away all the things that you
Well, they're
already
taking
have.
away what will help you to have that and make you like bite like, you know, fish at some kind of
I
bait.
mean, for slavery, for example, we don't have slaves out right now, but people enslave themselves in order to get all the stuff they need to keep up with the Joneses. You know, they're basically wage slaves now. So you can buy people just by giving them a paycheck, and they'll do whatever you want.
Well, they will, and then if you fire them, then they collect some kind of unemployment or whatever, or they don't, and you know they end up more and more in an underclass.
I mean, look at Trump, how he got to be where he is. He would promise to pay a certain amount, and then he would only pay about half of that.
Well, as I heard a comedy routine, you know, voice puppet dog say at the inauguration, he said, "Well, people are saying that Trump paid for prostitutes to urinate on him," and he said, "I don't believe that at all. You know, when did Trump ever pay anyone what he owed them?"
Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that's what Putin's probably
a
got on
criminal.
Trump. He's probably got some
President of the
dossier. You heard about that
States
Steele
is
dossier?
a criminal, and
right?
the Republicans voted it in. Most of the white people voted for this guy. What does that
So, Mark,
say to you about the direction of the United
Mark,
States?
who uses
It
a
says
lodestone?
Scary shit.
Who says lodestone over and over again? And that's in that last dossier.
Well, I know what one is, but I don't
No, but
say it over and over again.
Pence, every other speech he's going, the lodestone, and then there's this thing that talked about Trump and all the people that are barely hanging on,
Lodestone?
trying to keep him. Yeah, and at last he's no longer the lodestone of our society. So some people think Pence might
All
have wrote
arrows
that thing.
point toward the lodestone.
Now imagine
for
if
the
Pence
North
gets
Pole.
in. We're all going to be wearing, cutting our hair and getting clean clothes. You know, got to get a job now. Doesn't matter if you're 90. Get a job. Yeah, Pence is old school, big time old school.
Well, I can only hope that Pence will be drawn up into this whole Trump impeachment thing. And I think, you know, if the election goes badly for the Republicans, Trump's going to be impeached. You don't think so? Well, we have a bet. We have a $10 bet on this, but I think
It'll
Trump
be just like
will
Clinton.
not make 8 years.
But just like Clinton, right? He got impeached in the House, but the Senate bailed him out. They didn't have enough votes in the Senate to impeach him. They impeached him in the House, so he was impeached, but they didn't have enough votes in the Senate to enact the impeachment. They have to have both houses of Congress, and Clinton slipped out there, you know. It all depends what is. Remember Clinton saying that?
Is, what is reality is. You know, this guy who was dying, he said, and what about those giants, you know, the red-haired, you know, mound builder giants of America and other parts of the world? These people could get to be 16 feet tall. I myself saw a 14-foot skeleton in New Bedford that was the so-called giant Indian, you know, in the New Bedford Museum in Massachusetts. Yeah, so, you know, who were those people? And this dying guy says, why can't we study the red-haired giants? What is it about the power? This is the guy who, since '96, with 2 PhDs, said, what's going on? There's this other reality on the internet, and it seems verifiable. And he came up with, there were these people. They were red-haired giants, sometimes with 2 rows of teeth. And they're in the US, and they are the mound builders, and they were mining and building things, and they were all over the world. And yet, here in the US, suddenly, as of about 70 years ago, we stopped talking about them altogether. But going back 100 years, they were all the rage in
it's
the
not been that long.
Smithsonian
Continental
publication
drift
annually. They were
Continental
always
drift
talking
was
about
considered to be a fallacy for a long time by all the learned people. You know, that one guy, that German observer, he wrote that article back in I think it was the early part of the 19th century, or late part of the 18th century, and he said there appears that their plates of tectonics are moving apart, the Earth, and everybody's going, the Earth ain't moving, there's nothing happening there. And now everybody takes it for granted. Now everybody takes it for granted. There's
yes, exactly.
So yeah, that's what I mean by reality changes as we learn more about it. You know, as we gather more information, we rearrange our idea of what reality is. Now, if they took you out and put you in Guantanamo for being a liberal, and started beating you with a hose every day, after a while you'd flip and you'd become one of their lackeys. You know, that's how brainwashing works, is that you can take people with strong convictions and turn it against them, and next thing you know, they're the most dedicated to your cause that you could ever think of.
Well, I personally on TV saw Captain Picard resist all of that and survive.
There's only 3 lights.
Personality.
You're supposed to say there's
so
5.
I think perhaps I could hold out. Yeah.
You can't. They can break you. They will. Everybody breaks at some point. Even McCain broke at a certain point.
So this guy, again, he's dying. I'll show this on my next show, but this guy is dying, and he's getting interviewed by this videographer friend of his, this woman who, along with her partner, man guy, you know, have made many videos of people saying the wildest stuff but all of it seems very verifiable. This guy says, okay, so what is it? You know, he has 2 PhDs. And he says, why are there these giant people that used to be recognized by archaeology, and suddenly they're gone? And it's like no one even ever deals with them. So what's up with that? And what's up with all of this obstruction of the idea that there was an Ice Age civilization? And the obstructing forces have really lost out at this point. Obviously, there was a civilization before the end of the last Ice Age that is totally discounted. And there may be, I think really, it's somewhat obvious that there are civilizations even older than that on this planet. And what's behind this force that doesn't want us to know these things? And why is it that even now, most people haven't picked up on it? I would say that many people have picked up on it. And as long as there's any part of the world that has a free internet, that will continue to be a growing part of the population. But you end any kind of freedom on the internet, and if the US adopts a Chinese model of internet governance to prevent fake news and, you know, agitators, you know, from having hold of the internet, you know, unless that happens, that will continue to be a growing part of the population.
Turn on one of those religious channels where they're building some new spa for all the top dogs. You know, we're building a church, they call it, but they really, it's got waterfalls, it's got all this spa equipment, you know, and the guy who's the head pastor, he gets to use it all for free. And nobody ever catches on that this guy's milking them like Jim Baker did for their money, right? Remember Jim Baker?
Oh, yeah,
He was out of
absolutely.
Muskegon.
Yes.
And everybody was sending him millions and millions of dollars to build
Fannie
this.
Mae, whatever, what's her face?
And he
too.
used
I
like
think they
10
met
million.
there, in fact.
I mean, he had hundreds of millions, and they'd used 10 million to make it look like something was actually getting done. But he was really pocketing the rest and having an affair with Jessica, you know. And here, remember back, it wasn't that long ago when everybody was rallying against Clinton, how he got the BJ in the Oval Office. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. Now we got
Penis-gate, yeah.
now we got a guy that makes Bill Clinton look like
Did he
a
actually
Mormon.
put his penis in that woman under oath?
Blue dresses and stuff. Who knows? I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
No, he said, well, essentially
Yeah.
he meant he did not put his penis inside
He
of that
didn't
woman.
have the ability to
They
get,
did
make
other
babies.
things,
It
yeah.
was a blowjob, is what it was.
So-
Big deal. You know, and they wanted to impeach him for that. They did. But we got
They
this
did,
guy.
but he didn't get convicted.
And we got this guy now.
Trump, he's going to get convicted. You know,
I don't think so.
We have a bet, $10 bet.
Yep, $10 bet. I don't think he'll be impeached, at least on the first.
You know,
Right.
I saw this guy, what he was going in with. I said, no way he's going to survive that.
Did-
And then I've seen,
You gotta have
my
two-thirds
gosh,
of
he's actually
Congress.
popular. His popularity
two-thirds of
at a
Congress.
certain point actually rose. My gosh.
No,
Most white people like this guy. You know what?
Hey,
Trump
Mark,
has awakened their inner
Trump
racist.
is America. Trump is a
He
very,
awakened
very
their inner
significant part.
racist is what he did.
You know, he's the doctor, he's the Mr. Hyde of America. He's the
Oh,
ugly
yeah.
guy that comes in and slaps
Yeah,
people
that's for
around.
sure.
You know, it hurts people. Obama was the Dr. Jekyll. He was
Dr.
a
Jekyll,
nice
that's
guy.
right.
He was
Trump is the
always knew the
anti-Obama,
right thing
yeah.
to say. So you got Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and that
Yeah.
is America, really.
There you go.
They don't want to see how much pain and suffering. I remember in that one film about Bowling for Columbine, how they asked these guys about these nuclear weapons that they were building. Michael Moore, and he says, "You really? Yes, it's the best nuclear weapon in the world. You know, we build them right here in Montana, and we are so proud of these nuclear bombs." Well, don't you think, you know, maybe stopping to build these things would be a good idea? You know, they don't think that. They don't. All they know is there's a job there, build nuclear bombs. So, as a species, we're probably programmed for self-destruction at some point. Now, whether a human being can escape that sort of programming is the question. And that's what, if you read Philip K. Dick or a lot of these David Icke books or any of these conspiracy theories, it is possible to wake up and come out. What's the name of one of his books? Get off your knees, wake up, and the lion sleeps no more.
Yeah, that's my book. You still have to get it back to me someday.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The lion sleeps no more. He's just talking about coming out, take a look behind the curtain.
Yeah, you know, I think that who are we talking about? The Englishman,
Which one?
the one who wrote the book.
David Icke?
Ike,
Yeah.
David Icke, or
Yeah.
Ike.
ICKE.
He
whatever.
says Ike. Well, he is. He's very focused on a particular idea that there are these reptilians. You know, exactly what a reptilian is I think, hard to define to me. I don't know if we're talking about the gray aliens. I don't think we're quite talking about them, but.
Well, what would we
But,
do?
okay, the guy who's dying, he says that there are aliens who aren't really aliens. There are fellow Earthling hominids, but they're a different species,
Homo
and they're
sapiens
smarter
sapiens
than we are.
sapiens, yeah.
They have bigger brains. They're like the Akhenaten types with the boop, you know, the
Yeah.
thing coming up. So, but he says there's very few of them, and they make themselves very scarce or hidden somehow.
Right.
And I think that it could be possible, and that could be the reason behind the mystery of why they don't want to talk about the big people that that have been unearthed, and they want to just give them to the Native American community as ancestors, but they're probably not their ancestors, because they're too
Kachina.
big. They're too
They're
big.
Kachinas.
Well, Native
Star
Americans
people.
were here before European Americans. But there was something here before the Native Americans, I
Yeah,
believe.
like in Hawaii, the Menehune were there before the native Hawaiians took over.
And maybe those people that were here before the Native Americans, and certainly before the European Americans, are still on Earth, but they're no longer like living in their mound villages or whatever. They were of a older and higher civilization.
Did you read?
And they're still hidden from
Did you
us,
hear
really.
about that? The state of Massachusetts gave a certificate for the first verifiable UFO experience that was
Yes.
recorded by over 250 people.
That was
saw it.
going to run on one of our shows. I'm not sure. I don't think it quite made it. I think there
And it
was a
looked
show
like
that we didn't
it
do.
was a sphere. And it had these lights that came down, made it look like an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And everybody that saw it saw the same thing.
Yeah, they put up a National Registrar of Historical Places. But then a counter element in the community has been trying to get that removed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I heard about these latest sightings of these small-headed AI-like aliens. Have you heard about that? They have real small heads, and they
oh, the baseball head people?
yeah, and they're hardly human. They're like almost a
Well,
blend.
with a baseball-sized head, I would say
part
so.
human, part machine, kind
Oh,
of.
you mean they're hardly...
They're
they
hardly
don't quite
alive, hardly biological. They're almost completely machine.
There are perceptible artificial-looking elements.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people think the grays are artificial too.
Yes.
You know, but they call them a almost life form, a kind of a near life form. They're not
Well,
fully alive.
they're puppets operated by spirits that don't necessarily need to otherwise manifest, but they're
Right.
using these
Yeah.
things to somewhat manifest themselves.
You know what
So
the
these things
Egyptian
are
called
not,
that?
That's like,
That
that
was
would
the
be the
Ka.
idea of a guardian angel.
Have you
for
heard
instance.
that?
Huh, what?
The Egyptian called that the Ka.
The Egyptians had the Ka, and they had the Ba, and they had something else that I can't remember. So they had like 3 elements of the soul
Yeah.
that had their own schedule of, departing the body and all this kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
thing. So they saw it as a process of particular aspects of the soul going into the spirit world on a different schedule.
And the Tibetan Book of the Dead is very similar to that too. They talk to your body for 4 days to guide you, your consciousness through these different paths, while your body just sits there and is inert. So our bodies are probably some kind of husk for this Ka, or a soul, or whatever it is that animates and makes something alive.
Well,
That's what that biocentrism book was all about, is that the universe was really created by life, not the other way around.
these aliens that the U.S. especially seems to contact, these gray things, seem to be on the lower level of being entities like we are entities, being like active animals. These seem to be kind of almost like the robot-like life forms of some sort. Yeah, like they're...
That's what we send to other planets. We don't send living biological creatures, we send robots.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
if they're really that far advanced, then maybe Philip K. Dick was right. Maybe we are androids and we don't even know it.
well, Philip K. Dick is now an android, believe it or not. I didn't know this until about a month ago, but there's a Philip K. Dick android, and you can have a conversation with him, and he'll lounge around on his couch and talk sci-fi with you, and he'll get into Gnosticism and talk about Valis and
The pink light ray.
the pink ray that hit me or whatever. Plus, he'll talk about contemporary politics. And this guy is an android, and he looks quite human, But there's also this other robot by the same corporation that's been on the talk show circuit. It's been like to the Tonight Show and to Saturday Night Live, and it's called Sophia. And Sophia, the android robot, supposedly has achieved citizenship in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
Elon Musk these days is, on video, like looking depressed and saying, I warned them about AI, and I warned them about the environment, but it's all is lost, all is lost.
You heard about his
Now
latest?
he's building
Trip
he
around
bought
the
his
moon.
own rock drill subterrane. So it's like these big 100-foot long vehicles manned by a crew of 6 or whatever, and they go on shifts and operate this thing and engineer this thing, make sure it continues to work. And what it does is it has diamond drill bits, and it digs through the earth, and the earth gets processed and turned into a cement. So it eats, and then it like poops out perfect cement tubes that are airtight. And this is what the elite in the United States and in other parts of the world, I suppose, have been building for themselves, are chambers and connected places underground, and this seems to be absolutely true. And now even Elon Musk is building his own, because I think he made himself unliked by the other people, and they don't really want to invite him into their, post-apocalyptic
Well, they found out
world.
that the human eye can only follow objects that travel at under a certain speed. If the speed is so great, I don't know exactly what the speed is, but I know that they're building these tubes and shooting these things out of it that they captured. Remember that one show we did where they captured it it was out in Colorado, and they went out into this open field to shoot this part of this TV news program, and said, this is where the new shopping mall and everything's going to be. They didn't think twice about it until they took the film back, and then they saw something shoot out of one of these tubes, and they slowed the film way down, and they took it to an expert on aircraft design, and he couldn't identify it because it was shooting out of these tubes at such a fast rate of speed that the eye can't follow it.
Whatever it was that was occupying that zone said, shopping mall.
I know. See, now we
Crap, I gotta get out of
we
here.
at least entertain the possibility that this could be true. These huge hermetically sealed tubes with the elites shooting back and forth at hundreds of miles an hour, thousands of miles an hour, whatever. Underground cities. Now, why doesn't the average guy think this? He's going, what a bunch of crap. I can't believe that.
Because the average guy he's involved in sports, and he's involved in whatever the celebrities are doing, and actually he doesn't even want to know. The average guy doesn't want to know about these things.
Now, has the average guy ever really wanted to know, or did he want to kind of be shuffled along?
Well, if the average guy could be given bread and circuses, as the Romans did, then he says, I like the government. It gives me bread and circuses, and so I will vote for the government.
Nothing to complain about, really, as long as it doesn't affect me. But you're right. Now, what about guys like us?
The world is falling apart. Okay.
We study, we read, we explore, and we find things that the average guy knows nothing about and doesn't want to know anything about. And why is it so important to us to know these things?
It's the world. It is the real world. There is a real reality.
The desert of the real? Is that the one?
Yes.
Like in
This is the desert of the real. So I would say in the Matrix, way of looking at things, this is the desert of the real. This guy who's dying, he's bringing up these points. Why can't we talk about the giants? Are they still here? Are they really manipulating us? Are they killing us and using our sociopathic elites to kill us? I think it's quite possible because apparently there's been a tremendous amount of underground construction. And I think that's what it's about. They know that something's coming, and we're not invited to whatever it is that's coming.
I still think,
and it could be an attack.
I still think the greatest
upon the mass of humanity by the people who consider themselves the privileged elites who need to protect the Earth and its biosphere.
I get the feeling with the age of the universe that there have come and gone many of these civilizations.
I think so too. I think that's
the thing that got me thinking was that nanotechnology screw that was inside of that 100-million-year-old rock. When they opened it up and they had these little tiny
things
screws
like that. And the
that
rock
could not possibly be made by nature. They had to be made by high-tech equipment.
Technological
and yet the rock was 100 million years old.
Yeah. Well, there are little machined springs and things that are, very small parts of machines that are embedded inside of rocks that are many million years old, even 1 billion years old, found in Siberia, wherever, and these continue to show up.
Now, what about that thing on the moon?
They are ignored by the mass of humanity.
What
They're
about that thing on the
ignored
moon?
by academia. Academia won't touch it. Instead, they say, "Oh, it's an anomaly."
Well, you remember how John Fitzpatrick
If
laughed
it's an
at us
anomaly,
when we brought up.
it has to shatter your model. If it doesn't shatter your model, you're
Remember
not
when
intellectually.
we brought up Richard
honest.
Hoagland's book, Dark Mission,
Yes.
and John Fitzpatrick laughed at us, thinking that how can you even
Oh yeah.
consider this guy as legitimate or has any credence at all? But yet,
but-
if you look into it,
but
there
we
is
know-
some
we
kind
know
of
many
object
people like
on
that.
the moon.
There are good friends. Many of our good friends
Hundreds,
totally take that attitude.
not hundreds of miles, but miles and miles high. That Sentinel thing on the moon.
There are structures
on the dark side of the moon.
Yes.
Structures that are
For
miles
sure.
high, made out of glass.
I think it's verifiable, very verifiable
Now,
that.
why won't
there's
they let us
all
know
sorts
these
of
things?
massive structures on the moon.
Wouldn't you
of
think that would be a
unknown
great-
antiquity? But they're there.
I mean, look at Troy.
Mars as
how
well.
the guy had to go over to Troy and discover it and find out that it wasn't just a myth. There was actually a city of Troy. And
Right. He knew exactly where to look for it too, and he
And,
found
and
it.
then the guy with the Minoans, the Arthur Evans, Sir Arthur Evans. He went over there. His father was a huge archaeologist, and he went over there and he discovered the Minoan people that were preceded the Mycenaeans in the Mediterranean. So I'm thinking in the cycle of things, these things rising and falling, they probably come to a place like we're at right now, where there are these massive men that are kind of the doughboys that just want to lay on the couch and eat the potato chips. Like Nietzsche said, the average man would become a potato chip eating couch potato. And the Ubermensch was a few and far between. These could be these guys that you're talking about, these guys with these super brains and elongated skulls and things, a form of the Ubermensch.
Well,
Now, not like Hitler decided the Ubermensch was, but something that nature decides is the next. Because look at our idea about the
I think it's possible
Australopithecines,
that there's a
right up to
race of
Cro-Magnon man up
people
to
that believe that they're superior and now they're hidden. And they are actually manipulating us and attacking us to eliminate us now that we've become so prevalent and we've done what they needed doing. We created or recreated a high-tech civilization for them to take over, even though they're a tiny minority and they remain hidden. We don't see them as they are. They look different
Have you
than
seen
we
that
do, apparently.
latest Avenger
Anyway,
movie?
this is what this giant guy says. I think that's quite possible. If those giants were older and more advanced than we, who's to say that they just didn't decide to, oh, well, I guess we need to hide now and we have the power and technology to do that, so why don't we do that? And we'll continue to manipulate, this lesser species, which we've always done since the end of the last civilization.
Well, that's what we do in our schools now. We dumb people
Yeah, the
down.
schools, they're not about teaching people about what has been. They have
basically,
agendas. They
prisons.
really do. Even the public schools have an agenda. They don't want to be political.
Well, the average guy
all,
has got so much anxiety about his career and making money and stuff that he can't take off and do the adventurous things that we do because we're whatever it is in
Well,
our
they
DNA
have-
that makes us do that.
They have families and they have property and they have things that they're invested in.
And then they bring in the
And
children.
you
It's
and
always
I,
the children.
kind of live the piratical life where we don't necessarily have all those things. So.
And yet we have artists and authors that write books about these kind of things, like Long Day's Journey into Night, Eugene O'Neill, where when he was the main character, played by Sir John Gielgud in the movie, he was a great actor, and then he got that good role. It was like some government agent came in and said, you're perfect for the pirate role. We're going to pay you a lot of money. Just play the pirate for the rest of your life. And that's what he did. And guess what? His kids lost touch with their father at that point. Sure, he became a provider. Sure, he became a steady force in the theater. but he never challenged himself anymore. He just kind of went through the routine, and then, I don't know if you read the book or not, but he starts pinching pennies, and one of the reasons Katharine Hepburn, who plays his wife, becomes a morphine addict is because he hires these cheap doctors that just shoot him up with morphine. Oh, look at how miracle drug, shoot him up. Pretty soon his wife's a morphine addict. All throughout the movie, all she does is float in and out of the scene. But the thing that got me was that how, when the father was really, really trying and they were struggling and they didn't have much money, the kids were into it. They were excited to be around their dad because they could feel the creative juices were flowing. But once he got that steady, routine, safe, structured job, he lost that edge. Whatever it takes for the truly wild, creative type to survive, he lost it and became comfortably numb, as they say.
Well, being comfortably numb, I think that's not an accident. I think people are comfortably numb because for their real version of reality, they go to the national news or whatever, but all over the country, there have been these reports of booms and flashes, and I think anyone who looks at the mass of this material, and there's hundreds of examples of this from local news in the U.S., and I was going to show like 7 clips, one after another of this kind of thing. They're saying, what's this boom? Why are windows broken? Why did we have an earthquake? What's with the boom earthquake thing? It's happened everywhere. They're building an underground complex for the extreme elites, and they have actually built the so-called FEMA camp complex is actually something that also exists. And I think we're really on the precipice of an extreme climate situation. I recently saw a clip, and I don't know the date exactly. I never was able to have the time to retrace what I did to find it, but Senator Kerry is talking to the French foreign minister, and I think it's relatively recently. And the French foreign minister standing there with Kerry, and the flashes are going off, the media is taking pictures, photo op, and they're making their statement. And the French guy says, we have 500 days till climate chaos. What was that? And somehow I never got back to it, and I didn't quite retrace it, but I think truly people are going to see something horrendous. And one thing I would have shown is that all over the Arctic, there are these craters where methane has blown out of the tundra.
Yeah.
So the tundra wasn't the Arctic long ago. Like 10 or even 30,000 years ago, there was a different Arctic. I'm going to say 10,000. And then there was a shift, and instead of the North Pole being like where Hudson's Bay is, it went to where it is now, and that made Siberia, which hadn't been the Arctic, become the Arctic. And the elephant creature, the mammoth, froze almost instantly with tropical food still in their mouths. They froze because suddenly they were at the north.
Unable
they
to
were in the
adapt.
deep winter of some other climate.
Yeah, and then the bison took over after the woolly mammoth as the main food source for large animals for the native people, according to the history books anyway.
So anyway, there's something strange going on. People need to know that fish are dying all over the ocean. There's been mass die-offs off of eastern England of ocean life, and there's on the Mediterranean coasts, really all over the world. I could have shown 7 clips of millions to billions of life forms on the shores. The ocean, and it's well known that all the coral reefs in the world are dead or dying right now. So the ocean has taken so much carbon that it's becoming inhospitable to the life forms, and they're dying. And people aren't freaking out at that. They're not. There's a controlled reaction, I think, going on, and people don't.
Did you hear on NPR this
Don't
morning
respond.
about the active radar tests they're doing and all the ocean life is getting freaked out because they rely totally on their hearing. They said if they don't have their hearing, they're good as dead. But they've got these high energy machines now that shoot radar. Instead of passively receiving radar, they shoot radar out actively in this high energy beam field, kind of like the death ray that Tesla talked about. So they can stop motors from miles away and have planes crash and all this kind of thing just by getting the right sympathetic vibrations. And we're living in a technological world like that. Now, you might think that the horrors of today are unprecedented, but I can tell you there have been some pretty horrific eras in human history. People didn't just live in the Garden of Eden and eat the fruit of Shangri-La.
Suddenly.
It was kill or be killed for a long time. I mean,
Well, it still is clear.
you only lived to be about 30 years old if you were lucky. In fact, you died with a happy countenance on your face if you were a Viking warrior that wanted to go to Valhalla. You had to die in battle and prove your worth.
Better
See how many
than
people
all
do
your
that now.
teeth falling out and dying.
Well, you
old
only
age,
lived to
I
be about
suppose.
30. You know, so your teeth were good to be 30. Now we're living to be 80, 90 years old with our, trying to preserve teeth that were only meant to be maybe 50 years old. But we got all these plastic parts now for our bodies. And steel, stainless steel things, and titanium clips and things.
You know what? There's this tremendous amount of energy put into research to be able to download people's consciousness into robot forms. It's like that Star Trek where I am Sargon,
Right.
Kirk and
I am beautiful.
Spock were
You are
trying to-
beautiful.
yeah.
We are beautiful.
Oh, no, that was...
A different one. When
you're thinking of
the
one
machine
of the
was shooting
death
down.
of the computer thing where...
Yeah. Then he had to go. I'm going to tell you the truth every time, but I'll tell you.
I am great, you are great,
Yeah.
we are great.
We are great. And he got hung up on, and couldn't deal with an illogical.
He couldn't deal with his child being illogical.
So I'm going to tell you the truth every time, but I also got to tell you I lie, But I'm always telling you the truth.
Right, they killed a couple
How
of
can you be
systems that way.
lying if you tell the truth? How can you be
But how
telling?
can you tell the truth if you're lying if you're all that?
Yeah, and it blows up. The guy that did the Turing, Alan Turing, his first book was computable and non-computable numbers, because there are numbers that are not computable like that. They don't fit together well.
Well, in terms of non-computable, be very afraid of the Arctic Ocean. I've never had a show where I've really presented these roll-ins, but years ago, like 4 years ago, I presented roll-ins of 300-foot wide, 150 to 200-foot deep blowouts in the Siberian Arctic. And there had been explosions and craters, and the scientists were trying to figure out what it was. What they believed it was, and it certainly seems to be well true now, is that it was methane blowing out of the tundra. And now methane's blowing out of the oceans, blowing out of the tundra. It's making a stink off of California. It's because temperatures have risen just a little bit, enough to let this methane out, which increases the rate of warming. In the oceans that are cool, like California or the Arctic Ocean, or land masses that we know they haven't thawed for possibly as long as 30,000 years. And now they're thawing, and so we're facing a dire emergency. The last 2 years, the Arctic Ocean did not freeze solid. There were places like Alaska where you could look out across the Arctic Ocean in January and February and see no ice anywhere. And there are parts of the landmass of the Arctic Circle that never froze. And this is becoming a trend in the Arctic, and yet here in lower North America, in Michigan, our ground freezes every winter. And about 4 or 5 years ago or so, we had a very severe winter where we were in the 34 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit range. And yet, at that same time, and that was the so-called polar vortex, where somehow the polar, Arctic weather had moved down to us. And I think all that is bullshit. What it is RTF. It is,
Yeah.
it is these
Harp.
things that are expletives that should be deleted, but it's really going on.
Oh yeah. Well, they got billions of dollars
They
to play with.
manipulated this weather
All
for political
all for our
reasons.
own good.
I think they're trying to balance. I mean, they could say we're trying to save the world and balance this off.
I've been
but
trying
we're
to get
still
this in.
burning those fossil fuels.
Have you seen that
We're
last-
still not going into an emergency
Mark,
program.
have you seen the latest Avenger movie, the Infinity
No.
Wars,
No.
where Thanos comes out and he beats up the Hulk, he beats up everybody, gets the power rings, But his whole thing is wherever he goes, he kills half of the population. Because he goes, we live in a world of finite resources. I'm here to put things back in
Is he
balance.
supposed to be a good guy?
Well, that's what he says. He starts to balance his little knife on his finger. He goes, if it goes too far this way, it falls. If it goes too far this way, it falls. But if you hold it right in the middle, it's balanced. See,
So
I'm
he's
here
like,
to.
He's
the
an
balance. Hey, and if you
executioner.
hey, if you read that book Anti-Fragile, that's really a good one. But it's nature is the most anti-fragile thing on our planet, because every once in a while they have these tremendous explosions and firestorms and fires throughout the world, destroying everything, like they have in California right now, the forest fires. And that's what makes it stronger. It actually thrives through chaos.
Here's a strange story, perhaps to go out with, and that is in California. Okay, in California they have a guy named Dane Wigington, and he has an anti-geoengineering site. And he says that the weather is being highly manipulated, and the West has been sacrificed even to make these plausible fires where they put up a tremendous amount of carbon into the atmosphere in order to keep us cooler a few more years in order to make the big adjustment.
And spraying the metals up into the atmosphere too.
Just the carbon itself, making a cloud, to deflect some of the sun's energy. But at the same time, long term, all that carbon is going to make it worse. So in a nutshell, I would recommend this guy Dane Wigington and his movement to people. And look that up on the internet.
Well, good show, Mark. You talked quite convincingly, I thought. Didn't sound too rambling. Partial rambling, but not too bad.
Did you have fun?
Huh?
Did you have fun?
Yeah.
Good. Now, but you should be on when I actually have these rollings, because they're fascinating.
Yeah, I would like to.
I think
Well,